So the outsourcing decision, as I told you, is there are different phases are there when you want to make a decision whether we are going to give it to somebody else. The first one is what we call analysis and evaluation. So first of all, we might not outsource all the services, all the requirements. So we need to understand what exactly we want to, outsource, right? Before outsourcing them, we have to decide what will be the cost if you are going to develop in-house, if you want to develop or give it to somebody else. Now, let me get an example. Now, if you look at the information system we use at SLTC, for example, earlier we had an open source solution, open educat platform, and we have customized it and we call SIMS. Now, so some of the components in the SIMS we develop and some of the components actually we have purchased. So likewise, now we have to decide what exactly we want, right? And how crucial these the requirements, and what depends on the activities, right? So these things we need to understand. So that happens during analysis and evaluation. Then phase two is what we call the needs assessment and vendor selection, which means the need assessment means we need to understand what is the requirement, and then we have to create proposal for the requirements, and then we have to look for some vendors. Vendors means somebody who will offer or provide the services for us. Now, right now, the new management has decided to purchase a new information system for SLTC, and they were trying to find a suitable vendor and the product which we are going to implement as a new information system at SLTC. The third phase, on the other hand, the implementation. So you outsource the decision. Now, once you do that, so how do you implement, right? Because remember, now the vendors comes up with different solutions, and sometimes their solution may not be able to have it as it is because we have different requirements. So it will take some time to they have to customize their solution for us. So implementation and management takes some time, depend on the size of the contract that we are going to give it to, and the deliverable that we have expect, it might take some time, right? So this is exactly the third phase. So remember, so outsourcing decision, there are 3-phase process, and then the first one is analysis and evaluation. The second one needs assessment and vendor selection. Third one is implementation and management. Now, if you look at in more detail what really happens within the analysis and evaluation, we have to start with identifying organization goals and core competencies. Now, for example, in our case, in the university, our goal is to provide the quality education for the students. And to meet that, we have to think about what information system we want to have. Now, for example, we want to keep track of all the student details. We want to keep track of all the lecturer details. We want to keep track of all the delivery. For example, the lectures, the interactive sessions, so on. So we have to keep track of and the examination results, and even after you left from this place, we want to keep your information, because sometimes when you apply for masters, the PhD, sometimes we have to provide it again. So remember, we need to understand this. What are our organization goals, and what are our core competencies within the organization, right? So for example, we are actually providing the education service at SLTC, like we are providing it for undergraduates, we are providing it for postgraduates, and so on. Now, the second one is once we know what our goals and what our core competencies are, now we have to gather information about these activities, right? And then we need to understand what will be the cost if you are going to develop ourselves. Now, remember, in SLTC, we have our IT team and we have actually two teams. One team is actually working on hardware part, like they were maintaining servers and so on. And the other team, okay, so the other teams, um, sorry about that, I'm getting some messages from you. I'm actually going through, you guys are using some automated transcript services, it seems. Okay, right. So where we were? Okay, we were discussing about the in-house and outsourcing cost. Now, once you identify the organization goals and your core competencies, we need to understand, whether you are going to develop in-house, that means within the organization, or whether you are going to give it to somebody else to develop, right? Now, to make that decision, first of all, you need to understand the costs for development. Now, when you think about in-house development means that you have to allocate internal staff members for the development. So that means the cost will be their salaries, right? The equipments or software infrastructure that we need for the development. And if you look at for outsourcing costs, so the outsourcing costs, things like, for example, their licensing fees, and that may be, bulk payment in the beginning or every year or so. And sometimes they have some annual payments as well, like maintenance. Every year, they have to make payments. Now, for example, in your case, I told you, like we were discussing with some other companies about the information system for SLTC. So some outsourcing models are, so they were charging per student per year. For example, they might say, okay, we will charge 100 rupees per student per year, right? So we have to consider these costs and we have to calculate and we have to see what will be the cost in-house and the cost if you are going to give it to outside, right? And then we have to assess the criticality of these functions. Now, for example, when you say criticality, so how important or critical these activities, because if you develop inside, it's always easier for you to change, or dependence will be very less. But if you give it to somebody else, whenever you need some change of the existing system, you have to depend on them, right? So that is another thing that you have to look at, right? And about uh, the cost, since you are also looking at the cost, you have to think about the long-term costs. Now, when I say long-term cost, I told you about, like, usually when you outsource, you have to give a bulk payment, plus you have to give some maintenance, or every year service cost. We sometimes we call it service cost, which may be like every year you have to pay for a student, for example, right? So you have to think about these long-term cost investments and work morale and then the support. So these things should be considered during the phase number one, that is analysis and evaluation. Now, then once you actually have a very clear idea about this, we'll go to the phase number two, right? So during this, we will develop a detailed understanding of the needs and the capabilities and also possible solution providers. There we develop something called request for proposal. So that is, and this will be given to vendors. So which means we will normally say what are our requirements. Now, for example, I'm taking our university perspective. Let's say if you want to develop a request for proposal for the university, we have to tell that, okay, what are our goals? For example, I told you, like providing quality education for the students. For example, let's say like that. In that particular case, we have to say what are our requirements. So one requirement will be we want to keep track of our student information. That is one example. Then after that, we have to look for keeping track of all our lecturers, their qualifications, and what courses they are offering, right? All this information we have to keep track and we have to put into this proposal. So this proposal, normally we have to have your requirements and what are the problems that you are facing to be resolved. Like we want to keep track of all the student information, their course, details, their payment information, right? So these things are like sometimes problematic. So all these things need to be put it into this proposal, right? So if you have a very clear structured document, so this is very helpful and it easy for when you are sending to our outside vendors, they can easily, understand what our requirements and they can provide the required service. Now, once you do that, you have to evaluate the proposals, right? Because now what happens, you create a proposal and you send it to the vendors. So you can look for different places, like, for example, in our case, at SLTC, what we try to do, we contact a couple of solution providers. They had their own solutions. So we have to look for their solutions and what facilities they are providing. So we have to look for the technology. That means the technology they have used. Some are using cutting edge technology because technologies are changing. Some traditional, developed. So we have to look for their technology. Not only that, we have to look at their financial stability as well, because we have to make sure that, okay, they are available for us to support for some time. Their track record, which means whether they have provided the similar service for others and what their perspectives are. Like, for example, we have to look for after sales service, right? Now you providing a solution. Let's say you have a problem and whether these suppliers can give us the satisfactory answer. It's a must, especially when you go for outsourcing, right? So the track record and their customer support is what we need to evaluate during phase number two. Right. Now, once, let's say now you normally what you do is you select couple of, you give us a request for proposal and then vendors are sending their answers. And once we get the answers, we will check. Yeah, one of your mic is on. Hello. Anode, your mic is on. Right. Now, once you have selected the vendor, now you have checked a couple of their solutions, and then you have to select one of them. So usually team of people actually selecting the vendor. Once you select the vendor, right? Um, then we have to negotiate the contract, meaning like legally there should be a binding between the organization and the vendor. So we have to make it a contract. That means you agree on some predefined set of terms, how the solution and what are the rules and regulations. And when you are actually setting up a contract, it should be beneficial for the organization. Remember, that should be done with negotiating with the team. So there will be two teams from the organization side, and then the another team from the vendor side. They frequently meet and discuss how this is to be done, right? And then you have to define different service levels, and also you have to define the performance measurement criteria, like how do you define on these, right? Now, once you select the vendor and the solution, the last phase will be the implementation phase. So during that phase, basically we have to have very clear definition of tasks, right? And some time frame. For example, let's say student management information. So when are we going to, implement this? Right? Maybe within 3 months, 6 months, because I told you, like when you get at with the vendor, sometimes their ready-made solution might not be enough for us. So there could be changes that we might request. So if that is the case, you have to look for it, right? So this is important uh, because once you actually implementation, uh, so we have to make sure that what vendor agrees will be delivered. So you have to monitor them. So you monitor, evaluate their performance during the development and implementation, right? So you have to evaluate what they are delivering us. So ideally, what might happen is vendor might give us a solution, and we might not, you know, um, happy with their solution. So if you have any situation like this, you need to communicate as soon as possible and try to resolve any, gaps or the issues, right? So usually this can be done in a managerial level. So there will be a manager who actually look at decision based on whether to outsource and so on. So this information should be there, right? For example, there are two types of factors we might use. Horizontal factors, which means things like uh, defining what needs to be done, selecting and engaging or finding a vector, managing delivery, completion of this whole program. So these are like sometimes we call horizontal ones, right? And then this manager normally should handle all the day-to-day negotiations, right? If it is a global scales, so you have to make decisions at a very senior level, right? So basically, there will be a team who actually go through all these information, things like agreements, and then they will not expose. They keep it very confidential until you finalize the outsourcing decision, right? So I think now I hope you got an idea about the whole process, right? Now, the next one, to as a summary, uh, from this part, we can think outsourcing decision, you need some structure to get the best outcome. So you have to thoroughly access the needs, the requirements. You need to compare the costs, and then you have to compare the vendors. And remember, during this whole process, you have to have very clear communication. You have to monitor the performance of this, solution that you actually have acquired for the organization, and have a fair contract, right? So all these are very important for successful outsourcing relationship, right? Now, there are a couple of examples actually from this book. Let me briefly talk about how people have decided on outsourcing example. Now, in this case, the gateway accessory store is actually example from the book where they had some electronic accessory business, or it's a e-business, right? And this has happened just the internet came in. So when the internet actually came in at those days, now people actually started, selling or providing their accessories online, right? Now, so they are actually, this particular website, actually, they are not doing it online. Instead, they have, you got some other partner to do that for you. So what happens? There is this e-commerce are the ones actually taken care of the e-business of gateway accessory, right? So likewise, you can see sometimes if you do not have the expertise, so then you can actually always outsource, right? You can ask somebody else to take care of this, right? So what happens? Usually, they can sell the products and the revenues, uh, through the outsourcing this to e-commerce.com. So the point that we want to get, so in Gateway, they don't have any computer experts in their department, right? And they have decided they don't want to have their own e-commerce site. And what they have decided is they get that expertise from somewhere else. So that's how they have outsourced to e-commerce, right? Okay, now, although this looks promising, or this is possible, there are many issues that come in. Meaning, like your work, you are giving it to somebody else. So there are a lot of issues that they come in. The first one will be legal issues, right? There, because like you have to agree on different things. Hmm? So, for example, in web-based implementations, websites, you have to be very careful about copyright infringement, meaning the images and text that you use should be authentic, otherwise there might be consequences. So usually we don't really think about in that manner, and we normally, when we need an image, we sometimes take it from somewhere else. But if you have not done this properly, you are violating some uh, rules which may get you have to answer in the future. So remember, it's very, very important to understand all these issues. So first one is legal issues. The second one we normally call regulatory issues. Now, regulatory meaning like other, tax citation issues, things like that, because in Sri Lanka, actually, we don't have, but there are some regulators, sometimes what you can actually sell online, for example. Sometimes online selling um, drugs, online selling of gambling. Usually, it's not possible. It's prohibited, and you are not allowed to work on that, because there are some regulatory bodies which they might monitor you. So you have to be very careful about regulatory issues. The third one is the security, right? Because um, uh, when you have outsourced, right? Then there might be security issues. So there could be hackers, right? You know, um, trying to crack your organization, right? Uh, there will be virus attacks, and also like the issues with your data in the systems, right? So and there could be attacks from even the internal employees. Sometimes internal employees can break things, especially they can erase data or they can manipulate your data. So there could be some issues like this, right? So then staffing issues. Now, for example, you have to have, let's say, you are going to convert your business to e-business. So you have to ask the question whether you have staff to implement this new initiative. Then system usability. Now, for example, when you look at nowadays the technology, we have vast various technology we use, and that means it's not very simple to design let's say website. Early days it might be just simply HTML and CSS. Then we have other technologies came in, right? So you have to look at usability of your system. Then system functionality, right? For example, early days creating a website will be very simple, and you can going through each and every functionality and you can make sure that it's working. But now with the new technology, websites are bit complex, right? And understanding like whether the system will function the way we want, it will consider it consumes a lot of time, right? And then system reliability, the another issue. Now sometimes when we create links in our website, they might not work. And sometimes when you're trying to connect your database, database might not link to your work. So these issues might affect the system reliability, right? So you have to make sure that everything works fine. So setting up this might be an issue. Then system integration, right? So for example, when you say a system, there might be different components, right? So when you say different components, we have to make sure that they have put them together. Now, for example, when you have a website and then we have another information system, so it should be integrated together, right? So that's one of the things you might have to face. The meaningful metrics, right? For example, how much you are going to spend on building the system, right? Will it increase our sales? Now, for example, if you have a system, I told you like we are trying to get it a new information system. Once we have the system in place, will that increase our sales or the number of students are entering the university, so that we have to measure, we have to judge, right? So how do you measure? It's actually very uh, dependent, but we can use different matrices. The last one, the costs, right? So sometimes when you're designing outsourcing, the costs are not visible in the beginning. Then later on, you might get some unexpected cost for your hardware, your software, and maybe you have to maybe provide some cost for even hiring new um, staff, right? So these are some of the outsourcing issues we might have to face if you are thinking about outsourcing. Okay, now that we have understood the issues, let's look at the costs and try to understand the cost, because I know uh, you guys are not experts to cost, but you have some idea now. For example, I know some of you are trying to get internship and then you are expecting some allowances, right? Some payment in some form, which you see in some other field. Sometimes they might not get any allowance at all, right? So remember that it's not always the case. But I think I know in IT industry, especially industry placements, they will give you some allowance, right? So the costs, likewise, the cost matters, especially when we want to develop a website, right? And the what is the cost? So this the amounts that I have taken from the book, right? So by that time, when they looking at developing a website, a large website, the cost would be, they have estimated like around like 6 million over 2 years. So remember, it's the cost come with some time frame as well. If it is the medium-sized company, they were saying it's about like 2 million again over 2 years. Small side, about $500,000 over 2 years. You see, it's changing, right? So similarly, when we look for the vendors, for let's say you are developing a website, so they will tell you, okay, I will do this for this amount, for it will take this many months. So you have to have some idea about these things, right? Now, when you want to use internet service providers, for example, you have different alternatives. Again, these are like from the book, very sign, they said $376 per month. And then we have another $10 per month. And then web designing will be will charge separately. So the point I want to make it here is you have, when you think about the costing, you have to think about the different cost aspect. Now, before we go to, web designing, we have to have the internet connectivity and you have to pay money for that. Now, even in our university, for the Wi-Fi setup, we have to pay some, money for every month also. And then the actual the website designing, again, you have to separately, make the costs. Right. So the website costs things like, this is again from the book, the Jessica, when she works for some company. So she was telling when she worked, uh, that company, charged $2,000 for 10 page and $10,000 for 25 page. And if it's a really high end work, then it's about like $50,000. So you see the timing, right? So you need to understand this. And how do you know the costs? Usually, people, when they list their services, they put how much they are going to charge. So by researching, by looking for some information, so you can get it done. Most of this you have to inquire, and they will provide you customized solution. Now, similar to the books, I have searched what will be the website design cost in Sri Lanka. So by going through the what is available on the internet, we can think 10-page sites usually vary in Sri Lanka from 50,000 to about 100,000. If it is a 25-page, so it might be around like 150,000 to 300,000. And if it's a very large high-end site for medium size, so then it's 500,000 to uh, 1 million, right? But if you ask me like why there's a range, minimum to maximum, it's because this cost actually based on design expertise, their project complexity, and also the what are the additional features you are providing. Right. So I told you like in previous one, you can research and see like their real costs, right? So when you're going to have your own, then you have to think about the computers that you are going to use, basically hardware, then operating systems and server software. Again, you have to pay money if it is not a open source one. Modems, early days, we have used to check the information. Then connectivity hardware, routers and all the network devices, right? Because if you are trying to have this in anywhere from 1,000 to 5,000, and then this is look at for connectivity hardware. And finally, communications, right? So if you have a connector, let's say router to your PC, right? If the speed is really slow, then you cannot expect the way you want about the website. So you need very high speed internet connectivity if you want to connect everything together, right? And all these things you need to understand as well, right? The next one, let's focus on the labor cost, because although you have the infrastructure or physical resources, if you don't have laborers who can actually work for you, it's not cheap. So according to the book, they say average cost for technology experts, it's about like 60,000 per year. And then Web pages, they talk about 30 to 150 per hour rates. So these are like some designated the rates. So you can see the same thing in Sri Lankan context as well. So in this particular case, you will see entry-level web developer. The cost that involved in this will be from 30,000 to 50,000 per month. And then if you go to the next level, mid-level web developer, it goes from 10 to 100,000. Right? And then senior web developers might start with 100,000, may go to I guess it's 2 million or 200,000, 200,000. And then web designers, they may charge about like 40,000 to 80,000. And the labor costs may be vary based on experience, skill level, and industry demand. So remember, so these are like some of the costs we will have. Right. Now, one more thing before we actually going to talk about this. Now, one of the things that you have to think is, right. Now, the cost, when you actually look for these different types of cost available, right? One thing you have to look for is the number of pages in your web, number of images, then animations, any other documents that you are going to keep, and what is the support, right? Is it capable of handling a video? And then you can think of whether you need encryption, right? And what security you need. So all these you have to carefully consider. Right. Now, our discussion, we started looking at whether we are going to design our own software system within the university or whether we are going to give it to somebody else. So that's what we were discussing. Okay, so before I move to the next part, let's have a 10 minutes break. After 10 minutes, that is now 8:50. I'm going to give you 10 minutes break and then we'll meet again 9 o'clock, which I'm going to continue our discussion on outsourcing and in-house development. Now, before the break, we were discussing about the things that we need to decided when we want to design an information system within this, and also if you're thinking of outsourcing them. Right. So we discuss about how you may estimate cost depend on your requirements and the functionality. And then you are sending them a proposal, and then they can involve in the bidding process, right? And then we also discuss For example, what are the issues that you have to think of, right? Now, when we look at this information, the one thing that you can think of why we need to, you know, for example, outsource. So there are some, things that we can decided on this. Now, for example, the first question is whether you should outsource, and there are some good reasons why you should outsource as well, right? So the first question is you have to decide whether you need to outsource this. For example, when we want to develop an information system, uh, it's a huge task, and you need a commitment. So then outsourcing could be one uh, uh, possible answer, because otherwise it will affects the internal staff if you are not familiar with the process. Now, what are the good reasons why you should do outsourcing? That first thing that you have to think about this. Now, for example, the price is one of the things that you can think of. Most of the time, outsourcing will be cost effective compared to deciding uh, you develop yourself, or we call in-house development, because you can always outsource uh, the work for a reputed service provider, which guarantees that you will get a quality, product or a service from outsource. And then expertise, because like if you want to develop something, and if you, I mean, we might not have our own expertise in house. Now, for example, that's the reason why sometimes we also rely on visiting lecturers compared to in-house staff, right? So that is again another, you can take it another way, that we are outsourcing, because it's the same. Is this we are not the expert now for some subjects? We don't have in-house staff. So always we look for the expertise. We can get quality delivery sometimes if you can actually hire an expert. Now the third one is, whatever we purchase, the hardware and software, they are going to obsolete. Meaning that after 6 months to maybe 3 years, let's say if it is a hardware, it might not be usable. You need to upgrade, and the cost is really high. So because of this, outsourcing is another way of doing things. Now, for example, uh, laboratory equipments, you can create your own lab, or you can hire it or outsource it. I know in some of our programs we deliver at SLTC, what we did, we had our own labs, which maybe things will be obsolete after some time, but always you can also get hire the equipment. Now, for example, hiring sound system, why we usually hire sound system from outside? Because you can keep a sound system, but then it get obsolete, right? So remember. So what happens if you outsource? Usually you will get state-of-the-art equipments, or more sophisticated equipment you get. Then the next one is the security, right? So sometimes our system will crash. We lose information. Actually, this has happened as well. So if you actually look for third party, uh, or you outsource this, so you might get benefit from the encryptions, the virus protections, the backing up, everything comes together. So you don't have to actually worry about these things, right? And then next is a complete solution. So when you actually, uh, you know, outsource to a known company, usually you get a complete solution starting from hosting. Let's say it's a website, hosting, the designing, maintenance, everything could come from one place. So this is advantage if you're using outsourcing to do things. Often you can get a complete solution. The next one is scalability. Now, for example, we can purchase hardware, we can build our own system. What if the company grows, right? In a university environment, let's say there are a lot of students wants to take up our courses, we might not be handled. So scalability is a good point where if you actually outsource this, right? So what happens whenever the organization grows, they can handle the complexity and function. It's possible if you outsource. Now, if you look at this outsourcing, you might think it's always a good thing, but there are some negative side as well, or disadvantages. The first one is there could be hidden charges. Now, for example, initially I told you like you have to make agreements with the vendors, but sometimes these charges are not visible, right? So, for example, your displaces, the data transfers that you have agreed in the beginning may not be enough, and then you will be charged for additional, right? So which might be not visible in the beginning, but later this will be visible. And then there are some rules that you have to obey because it's come from the outside. So you have to adapt the outsourcers policies because they are not your rules, right? So they will, come up with their own policy and you have to accommodate that. Then timeliness, right? So for example, now once you get used to the system developed by outsource body or a vendor, when you want to make changes, you have to depend on them, right? You request a modification and you have to wait, and that depends on how busy they are, like, so that you have to believe, you have to wait until the third party provides you the solution. Then the last one, sometimes what might happen is these companies, especially outsourced companies, can be acquired by somebody else. The management might change. So what happens? If somebody else take the company, how it affects to you? So it be a problem. So mergers and acquisitions means sometimes the outsourcing this company, they acquired by somebody else. What will happen? Right? So these are some of the disadvantages if you outsource. So remember, when you're choosing, right, you have to ask a couple of questions before you make that decision, right? One is, um, the pricing that the outsourced companies offer, right? And then you have a list of requirements, right? So for example, if you are looking for a vendor for managing a university, we have to make sure before we give that to somebody else, we have to make sure that they can deliver everything. They can provide all the services we have listed. And you have to be clear about your expertise as well. So this expertise you can actually measure. So usually we'll expect them to show us their portfolio, like, okay, what companies they have worked for, what solution they have provided, and so on. And the timing, how long they have been in this particular business. And what are the sales, right? And also you can request for their recommendation, right? So this is some of the information you can ask, right? So remember, outsourcing always has both advantages and disadvantages, and you have to look at the factors, and then based on their pros and cons, you have to make the decision, right? So it's up to you. Right. Now, the other things, how quickly they can respond. Because often when we believe on somebody else, when there's a problem comes in, you should be able to get contact to one of their persons, and we get the information we require. So the customer service is a must. For example, some companies, they are keen on their products, but not the after sales service. But remember, when we purchase a software, after sales service is a must. And you can check with their clients. So usually they will say, okay, here is our product and here is the list of companies who uses the product. So what you can do is you can talk to those companies, can get a feedback. Third one, whether they can provide the service, right? In continuously, we normally say to 24/7, which means 24 hours per day, 7 days per week, which means basically around the clock, whether they are providing the solution. Then what type of disaster recovery services do you provide? So when you have a clash, how you are going to, handle that situation? You can always ask. And how often you actually upgrade your hardware and services. These are like some of the key questions you need to ask. So these things needs to be questions, and you can get their potential answers. So based on that, you can actually make a decision. Last thing I want to discuss is your outsourcing model, right? Now, we discuss what outsourcing is. We discuss the advantages. We discuss their issues. Now, there are 3 ways that you can actually use this. So the first one is you can actually look, right, in-house model, which means this is usually preferred for large companies. We normally say large companies because large companies, you have necessary information, right, for them to come up with their own solution, right? So this is one way to handle this, right? So the in-house meaning you have technology, you have infrastructure, you have the expertise, then this is the cost, most cost beneficial for the large organization. Then full outsource. So in this particular case, we can provide everything to some other company, right? Or you can have several outsourcing companies or firms. Third one is a partial, right? Partial means you can have both. So in-house, as I told you earlier, it's good for large companies where you have everything about everything to develop the system, right? Full outsource, you give everything to the outsource company. Third, partial outsource model, which is combination of the previous two. So for example, you can host or you can have your website in your own servers, but to design and develop, you can hire people from outside. Now, commonly used method is you can outsource the server, but you can program inside. Third one, you can host the service, but you can purchase third-party software packages. So these are like three of these. Okay, so with that, right. So today's lesson, we just to summarize, we actually look at different phases. And we look at the possible solutions for the problem. You can bid on in-house or you can outsource, right? Okay, so now let's have a small group work to understand how we can select vendors, right? Now, if you go back the slides, I told you, when you are, let's say, we are going to outsource your development of information system. So to do that, we have to find, right? We have to find a vendor or a company who can handle this, right? So how do you decide on that one? I told you, I will go back to that slide. This is what I want you to do in the next 30 minutes. So as a group, I want you to look this. That means, like you did earlier, we will think of an information system And then you have to create a proposal. So in this proposal, you can have a little bit about the company, their the project, and then we can decide how we are going to select a vendor for the organization, right? And what I want you to think of is you will develop a small proposal where you are going to give it to somebody else, right? You think about an organization, you think about the information system that you want to develop, and then you think about what the company needs, right? Okay, so here is activity. We are going to develop a sample request for proposal. So that's the activity. You think about a particular problem organization, and then outsource uh, development of information system to a third party, right? And then to develop the draft, you have to provide them a proposal. You briefly write what the company is, what the project is, what the information system, what you need it, and the timeline, and also the budget, right? That's what I want you to do. So let me put up. So this is what we want to do within these next 30 minutes. And then once you finish, you are going to submit the group work. And that submission is the attendance, like people asking attendance lists. So attendance means you develop a proposal as a group, and once you submit the group work, I will take it as attendance. Right, now let me put into your groups first. Okay, I think what we are supposed to do in the group work, let me briefly explain once again, and we'll continue our work in the interactive session. So now the main thing that we have discussed for today's session is when we are want to like development information system, are we going to do it by ourselves or are we going to outsource, right? And when you want to outsource, we have to provide some information for the vendors, what we need. And this is what we call request for proposal. So there we have to list what our company is, what our objectives, what exactly needs to be implemented, what is the timeline, what is the budget, what is the criteria for selecting vendors. And also we can think of list of potential vendors. So I will share the handouts. So get prepared and come for the interactive session we can discuss. Now let me give you a like brief example where we need to do For example, in this particular example, this is a kind of a questions you might actually get, and we can ask you to write down. Now, for example, there's a e-commerce business called Eco Shop, and then they are selling their products online. Now, because of their growth, they cannot handle existing system, information system cannot handle their traffic. Now, they have decided to, develop with the new information system, and then they are going to, outsource. So this is the kind of a situation where we need to develop this kind of proposal where you can say what the companies and what their objectives are. And basically, scope work is basically they want to develop a new information system. Now, in this new information system, you can say, okay, user-friendly e-commerce platform, and whatever the requirements you can list under this. Then the timeline you can decide, like how many months you expect a company to work on, and let's say it could be 6 months, 1 year, depend on your requirement. And then there could be a budget, let's say 150,000. And then how do you are going to select a company? Criteria for selection, maybe they should have some experience of developing similar kind of information system early, and then they have to have a set of projects they have done early, and so on. So you can keep out those information, right? I hope you get an idea about what you expect to do. Let's continue this in coming interactive session. Actually, we have something else, but this will come in later stage. So I will take up this again, and we can work it as a group work. Right. That's, I think, all for today's session. So just to summarize the things that we have discussed, we mainly focus on the outsourcing, especially the development of information systems and what needs to be think about. So we started looking at all these different phases where we list our requirement and also selection of vendors and also implementation. And then finally, we discuss three models where you can actually work on. You can completely develop the information system in-house, or you can completely outsource the information system, or you can have a hybrid where, some parts you can develop and some part you can outsource. So that's uh, what we basically discussed today. Okay, guys. So I'll finish for today then. So hope to meet you guys next week, and we'll continue. Thank you, everyone.